Welcome back to It's Your Environment. I'm George Curtis, and we have a new guest. We have Charlotte's dad here, Frank Pagano. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You are basically a lifelong resident of the state of Alaska, but you've been kind of all over, haven't you?
That's correct.
You were born in Kodiak,
Born in Kodiak, August 24th, 1927.
and after that, you've spent some time in Kodiak. You've spent the last 40, 50 years in Anchorage, but in between, you've been around, haven't you? And of course, in the armed forces around the world.
Well, not quite around, more in the Far East.
Okay.
Japan, Korea.
All right. And in Kodiak, you still have family there?
I think I have one niece left there.
Did you attend schools in the Kodiak
Uh,
area?
I attended school up to the 7th grade, and then I went to a BIA school, which was Eklutna Vocational School, which was 26 miles out of Anchorage. I graduated from there and was drafted into the Army.
And what year would that have been that you joined the Army?
I was drafted in 1945, and I got deferred to finish my last year of high school, and was inducted into the Army October 1946.
Then how long were you in the armed forces
I,
before you came back to Alaska?
I spent the duration, they separated, let all draftees out in 1947. I got out, and then I went back to Kodiak. There was not much going on there except partying and drinking. I decided to go back into the military, and I re-enlisted and went to the parachute school at Fort Benning, Georgia, and then was assigned to the 82nd Airborne. And the Korean War broke out, and Truman extended everybody a year, and I volunteered for the Airborne Rangers, took Ranger training at Benning, Georgia, and then mountain training in Colorado, and shipped to Korea with the 3rd Infantry Division. Spent time there in the Hotchon Reservoir during the last Chinese Spring Offensive in 1951. Came home for discharge, went back to Kodiak, and settled in. Again, there wasn't any change. And I kept thinking of going back in the military, but I kept putting it off. Went fishing, made a little money, and got into the routine of doing my thing around Kodiak. And I was hired as a police officer and worked there for a while. Worked as a city utility crewman, operator equipment. Then I got recruited for the National Guard and assigned to take over the Guard unit in Kodiak, and had an opportunity for a promotion up into the battalion in Anchorage, and I accepted it and transferred up there and became the Command Sergeant Major of the 297th Infantry Alaska Guard, and retired out of that. Worked for the Civil Service, and was the acting chief of the Civil Rights Office, AFA, for the last couple of years, and retired out of that, and then went back and went to work for the native corporations, and left that, and went back to just retired status. And I had bought a little runabout boat, which was built in Flathead Lake, Montana, a little Standcraft, which was real powerful. I used that to fish and took friends out and did clam digging, put out shrimp pots and crab pots, and caught halibut, and would cook at night and have your wine. And when it turned about 1 o'clock, we realized it was time to go to bed. And next day, the same thing. I chartered my boat for the first 2 years and paid for it, and it just got too hectic, and so we sold that, and my wife and I bought a motorhome, and we traveled around motorhoming, went to my Army reunions at Fort Benning, stopped here and visited Charlotte. The kids then drove on to Mesa, Arizona, visited our other uh, grandchildren there, and then would start a motorhome and fly back to Anchorage and do it all over again.
So Alaska, mostly Anchorage, partly Kodiak and other areas, has really been your base for more than 80 years, most of your life.
That's been my home, yes.
There are some important dates in my recollection of Alaska history, one of which you and I weren't present for. I think about 1912 they had a big eruption and put a lot of ash out there in the Aleutian Islands and things like that. But then there's statehood, which you were in Alaska both before and after it became a state. And of course, the other one that I think stands out in many people's lives, the earthquake and the tidal wave. Was that about 64 or
19,
something like that?
March 24th, 1964.
Good Friday then.
Right, and I was National Guard. I was the first sergeant of the Kodiak unit, and we were at camp getting ready that night to pack up and get on a plane and go back to Kodiak, and we were having our sergeant major review on the parade field, and all of a sudden it starts shaking. People start falling on the ground, and you could see the ground wave. And my first recollection in my mind was seeing the old earthquake movies where the ground opens up and people fall in, and actually the ground was rumbling, and you could see it roll. And there was big 2.5-ton trucks parked that were just bouncing, moving along, and it seemed to last forever. And when it quit, everybody's wondering what next. And I don't remember if we had a couple aftershocks, but it hit the whole peninsula, and communications at that time was out. We heard Kodiak was wiped out, where we were all from. And we were all waiting that night trying to hear some news. So the next day, late, they finally got an Air National Guard, I believe it was a 130, loaded us up, took us into Kodiak. When I'm flying over, it was calm. See tops of houses, boats drifting around, and just devastation like a worn, torn country. We landed and then went home, and they put us on 60-day extended state active duty, which we sort of kept control in town, put all the communications from the doctor's offices to their homes, from the police station, everything. We set up all communications, and sort of we're the center for all the food bases to give out and all that stuff.
So at the time of the actual earthquake, you were in Anchorage, and Ellen and your youngsters were in
We're
Kodiak
in
and couldn't
Kodiak.
communicate with each
That's
other.
right.
And when you got to Kodiak, I've seen pictures of this. In fact, I have a book of it someplace. A good deal of Kodiak property and many people were lost.
I don't recall how many, but out the road in Kelson Bay, where the water came over, I think a couple people were taken out. And downtown, I think a couple were taken out. But big fishing boats were driven right up through town, right below the school. A big power barge that was loaded with crab, and I didn't think they'd ever get them on there, but some ship moving company out of Portland or Tacoma came up, and they took all the boats out and start the urban renewal, cleaning up Kodiak.
And there was a lot of rebuilding, I know, in Anchorage, but some in Kodiak and other areas that were devastated as well.
It was a complete urban renewal, rebuilt the Kodiak, and laid out completely different than what it was. Where my parents' home was right downtown, they they took that into urban renewal and paid him a meager piece of money for him, something like 16,000, which was their lifetime home. And they lived in some Aleutian home, and of course my home was on the hill way up out of nowhere. There was no way water was going to get there, but we were safe. And
Now, you and Ellen are retired, living in Anchorage. That's where your friends are. That's where at least some of your relatives are. But that's a pretty expensive area to retire, isn't it?
well, it is. It's getting to the point now that we both feel that there's not much in Alaska for us anymore. We've been contemplating moving some other place, but we're not sure of it. There's really nothing left in Alaska for us. There's all the outdoor life that we enjoyed, too old to enjoy it anymore.
Well, we are delighted that you came down here to visit Charlotte, her husband, and any grandkids you have here. We've been looking forward to this for a long, long time. We hope you stay, come again, bring some pictures, and we'd love to have you and Ellen back on the show. A real delight, Frank.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.